Okay, you're looking at the funkiest sock ever for two reasons. One, I was trying to use up odds and ends, and the second one is that we are working a toe-up Kitchener cast-on. First of all, let's finish the toe. Then I'll show you how we got here. We're going to tighten up all these loose stitches. This was where I started casting on. So we will start tightening up at the opposite end to avoid making any snarls. We're going to pull each loop tight in series, trying to pull it to the same tension as the other stitches. I'm trying to flip this back where you can see. Okay, next one. There we go. Keep on going like this all the way across. Let me tell you a little bit about this while I work. I started seeing the term pop up on my knitting groups, the toe-up Kitchener cast-on. So I went researching it, trying to figure out where it came from, how to do it, who invented it, and so on. As far as I can tell, but you may correct me if you know something I don't know, it's an adaptation of the old hand-knitting Kitchener stitch. And somebody, but I do not know who, figured out, well, you can do it in reverse. You can start at the toe with a loose stitch and tighten it up later. And if you notice, remember how in trying to Kitchener after the fact, we go into each stitch twice, up and down? That has happened here. But you're not having to search for the stitches. You already found them at the cast-on. And in a minute, I'll show you how we do that. At any rate, I looked for an inventor so as to ask for permission to show this on the Kiss loom, because that's what I wanted to do. We have not been doing this on the Kiss, and many people would like to, I am certain. And I could not find an inventor. And it's popping up all over on round looms. So I thought, surely this will work for the Kisses. And in fact, it does work for Kisses. See this one? I should have tightened it up a little bit more. It has a bumpy look, which means it's a little bit looser than it should be. And all I have to do is go back and work towards myself, pulling out a little bit of extra. See how it smooths right out? And until we get used to this technique, we'll probably be a little slow like this, feeling how tight is tight enough a little bit. This is actually my very first sock with this technique. See, we're getting a longer and longer piece as we work out the excess. Anyway, probably repeating myself a little bit, the best that I have been able to determine, this technique is an adaptation of a hand knitting toe-up technique, which is itself an adaptation of the time-honored top-down and finish with Kitchener technique. In both cases, we are lacing sets of stitches together by going in and out of them in the pattern that a knit stitch makes, so we've actually created a knitting row by a non-knitting method. There we go, that's the correct one. And my yarn tail's getting longer and longer, tightening it up, looking for the next appropriate place to pull. We're almost back to my first stitch. That loop worked its way into the spot it doesn't belong, so I'm pulling it through. There we go. I have just a few more to go. another one. The nice thing is, if you make any mistakes here, well, it's a little bit tedious, you can go back and pull your loops anew. It's not a big deal. Here they go. Let's make sure I don't have anything in the way of anything else. By now I do have quite a lot of yarn to pull through every stitch. And of course this method does use more yarn than you would otherwise use. However, you may like it if you have not learned to love standard Kitchener stitching. And I think that should be the next one. I'm getting better at spotting them. Your eyes will learn to follow this path, like that. Here we go, there. And eventually, you know what I did? I accidentally pulled it through the last stitch. The end came out the wrong way, but that is easily fixed. We'll do it together. If I did it, it's possible that one of you may do it. And voila, that should fix it. Now at this point, you want to double check your tension all the way across. Make sure you're pretty pleased with it. And then figure out which stitch to go down into to tie off. Now when I finish a toe, there's always a yarn tail no matter how you do it. I don't want a knot. Sometimes I do tie knots in knitting. I am not a purist about it. In toes, I don't, because they can be very annoying. Knots can. Toes, we all have. They're not annoying. So I weave in and out. And now I would snip that. So there is the Kitchener toe. Now, I bet you want to see how we got to the point that we could finish in this way. And I will show you. It's very peculiar, but very simple, really. First, we're going to knot a starting point in our yarn, as we always do, to hang on the first peg. This is the area that I'm going to knit the sock on. I'm going to start in one corner because it makes it easy to keep track of. So we are on peg number 1. We're going to wrap peg 2, wrap peg 3, coming back around the corner, wrap, keep the wraps all going in the same direction, even if it feels awkward to your fingers. Wrap, wrap. Of course, my wraps will become all different lengths, and now you can begin to see why did I have all of that long piece of yarn to pull through. Make sure not to miss a peg. If you do, you must start over. You can't go back and just catch it and imagine it'll turn out. You would be able to knit from that point, but what you would not be able to do is neatly pull through your Kitchenering when you go to finish the sock. Now remember, this is my first peg towards the center of the square from the line of pins. That's my line of pins. That's the first peg in use. Keep going on in order in the way that we would be ordering them to knit, except that we're going back and forth across, and we hardly ever have a reason to knit like that. Make sure that every peg only gets wrapped one time, but that it does get wrapped. This feels awkward, I'll tell you the truth, but you get used to it. I am finding that I need more tension on my yarn. Now here I'm turning another corner. And do you spot my mistake? I have to go back a couple. I wrapped a peg that was outside of my line of pins. It's easy to get confused. This one's correct. This one's correct. I had wrapped this one and I should not have. Now, the other thing that you could get confused about is where do the pins come into it? And we're treating it just like we treat normal knitting. We always work the peg from in between its pair of pins that surround it. So I'm going in front of this pin, around this peg, behind this pin, and so on. Round and around, and I'm nearly there. And the corner that I am about to reach is the corner that we will begin pulling the slack out of the yarn when we finish our sock. Around and around. Now from this point there is a loop on every pin. Not on every pin, I said that wrong, every peg. That means we can knit over a row. So we're going to wrap and knit one row completely normally, but this counts as part of the cast on, because we've got to get a true stitch on every peg before we can proceed. And we'll knit these over in the time-honored Kiss way. We're just making U-stitches. And here's my last side. All right, I'm starting with the final peg I wrapped to knit over. And we're just going to knit these all over as we always do, all the way around. We wrap. And I bet you'll never guess what we're going to do next. I have seen a version of this that I don't care for, to tell you the truth, that we're not doing, where the Kitchener occurs at the exact point of the toe. That does not allow for shaping the toe, and I'm not a fan of gathered toes at all, or just plain blunt toe. So here's what we've got. We are now going to proceed to short row the toe normally. So that means I wrap half the stitches in the entire sock and knit them over. And every row will get shorter. I'm going to wrap that. Oh, I'll knit this over first. As you probably recall, one always wraps the peg next to the last one that knitted to avoid holes in the sock. We'll knit these over. And I'm not going to short row the whole toe for you, because that's in many other videos of mine, and you can look at those. It's done in the normal way. But I'm going to short row enough of it to allow me to finish telling you the story of how this is going. As we knit, we're starting here. Nope, we're starting underneath. And we're knitting out to here. At the shortest short row we're here. We're knitting back to here. And this is the row that we pulled in. So we will, when we're done short rowing, we'll be able to change colors if we want, as I did here. But whatever we do, we'll be knitting the tubular part of the foot on up here. So where am I? I have knitted my first short row, and it consists of exactly half of the stitches in the sock. Wrap the next peg and knit back. and I will wrap one fewer peg this time and knit it. So my row will start getting shorter. And ultimately, I think for this pair of socks, my shortest row is 4 stitches. And then I come back out to whatever number this is, I've forgotten. Okay, there's one peg left, which I'm not going to knit. This is my last one. So we are knitting a traditional short row toe, and it's just exactly the same way you knit the heel usually. The only difference is we've really already worked our Kitchener stitch. Effectively, we have gone in and out of every one of the stitches on that very first row that I told you completed the cast on. We've already gone up and down with the yarn through those stitches, so all we have to do is pull it tight later. As you recall, we'll now, before knitting back, wrap the next peg over and begin knitting back. The rest of the sock will be completed exactly normally, and you'll end up with that loopy bunch of stuff at the end of the toe, as we had a moment ago. And you'll start tightening up, and pretty soon you'll have a Kitchener sock toe.